everyone, I'm Beth.
And I'm Jeff.
And this is your Enneagram Coach, the podcast. And we're here to help you to understand yourselves with astonishing clarity so that you can break free from self-condemnation, fear, and shame by knowing and experiencing the unconditional love, forgiveness, and freedom in Christ. And if you didn't know, we're on YouTube, so you can head over there, watch this podcast, and definitely like and subscribe so you don't miss anything new.
Well, today we're going to be talking about the type 8's wings, which are 7 and 9. If the concept of wings is new to you, we suggest going back to episode 160, where we explain Enneagram wings in more detail. But essentially, wings are the two types directly next to your main type on the Enneagram symbol. So, for example, I am a 6, and so my wings are 5 and 7, and Beth here is a type 9, and so her wings are type 8 and 1.
Yeah, exactly. So today we get the privilege of having two guests that are both type 8s, and we get to hear about their 7 wing and their 9 wing. But don't forget that it's their main type that is the driving force behind their thoughts, feelings, and behaviors based on their core motivations, which is their core fear, desire, weakness, and longing. But the wings play a significant role because they have their own perspective from their core motivations. And so they see and interpret the world in their own way, and they want to influence your main type to see it their way and do it their way. And so today we get to talk about how these wings do influence us, both in healthy and unhealthy ways.
Well, and because we actually have relationships with these two parts of our life, and they show up in small ways as well as big ways. And so we'll be referring to wings as parts of us, which we discuss more in our newest book, More Than Your Number. You'll want to check it out because it's going to go deep into understanding wings and how they play a role in our lives, particularly expressed through the lens of our main type. Now, talking about your wings as parts might seem a little strange at first, but we actually already speak this way without even realizing it. When we're talking with others, we can feel pulled in different directions in our thoughts and our feelings and behaviors. So you may say things like, well, a part of me wants to do this, a part of me wants to do this, part of me feels this way, but a part of me feels this way. Mm-hmm. Or if you've been married longer than a honeymoon, how you can feel both love and anger for your spouse all at one time.
What?
I've never been angry with you.
Know.
I mean, how could you ever be angry with a 9?
You? Right, exactly.
Because they never do anything wrong.
Right.
And they're the sweetest things.
Right. Until they're not. Wait, what?
But remember this, that both our main type is driven by our core motivations, and these wings bring their own perspectives through the lens of their core motivations that can actually bring up contradicting thoughts and feelings. Mm-hmm. So as we talk about type 8's wings with our guest, who we're going to introduce here in a minute, but keep in mind that they always remain a type 8 with the core motivations of a type 8, and that's going to be leading the way. But what you'll hear today is how in certain situations or in relationships, their 9 wing and their 7 wing parts will show up and influence their thoughts and behaviors in both healthy and unhealthy way.
Yeah, that's right. So, but before we introduce our guest, I just want to paint a picture of the type 8s for those that either aren't familiar or you just need a refresher. Our type 8s, we call them the passionate protectors. They are confident, decisive, and assertive leaders. They are powerful change agents, and especially when they're seeking justice or the protection of others. Now, if you have an 8 in your life, you're going to know because you're going to feel the protection that they offer to those that are marginalized, the underdogs, those who are at the mercy of injustice. And they want to empower those that they know have so much to offer the world. Now, of course, 8s don't always focus on others, and what you'll notice is they have intense emotions and an intense drive to protect themselves from betrayal, powerlessness, and being blindsided. And they always have usually this strong exterior for others to see because they're trying to minimize their vulnerability in the front of others. Now, they fear being weak and vulnerable, but what you can see that comes outward from that is times of being maybe too blunt, confrontational, insensitive, domineering, cynical, and even vengeful. Now, all of these attributes, the healthy and all the way to the unhealthy, stem from their core motivations. So for them, their core fear is the fear of being weak, powerless, harmed, controlled, vulnerable, manipulated, and left at the mercy of injustice. Now, they desire to protect themselves and those in their small inner circle. Now, they have a core weakness of lust or excess, and this is where they're constantly desiring intensity and control, power, pushing themselves willfully in life and even through people to get what they want. Now, their core longing is to hear, "You will not be betrayed." So you can think of eights, this is my favorite analogy, as those big, strong diesel snowplows up in the north that we're accustomed to. Or if you're not and you're down in the south, you know what I'm talking about when you look at the Weather Channel. We absolutely need these big diesel snowplows when there's a foot of snow on the highway or any road for that matter. You can't just get out there with a little shovel. We need these powerful change agents to plow a path for us. It is inspiring to watch an 8 do what they are made to do. And that is to take on the hits and to plow a path for others. So when they're at their healthiest, that is exactly what they're doing. They're plowing a path for us.
So our guests today are Stacy and Wilson. Wilson. Sorry, I'll put another syllable in your name. Who are both certified Enneagram coaches here at Your Enneagram Coach, and you can find them both in our coaches directory by going to myenneagramcoach.com. So, Stacy, thank you so much for joining us today. Tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
Hey, I'm really appreciative to be here. So thank you for the invitation. I told my husband, I get to be on a podcast with some kind of famous people. So that's how I see you guys.
That is awesome. Well, we appreciate it, but we don't necessarily
we're
feel
just
that
Beth and
way.
Jeff.
You're just Beth and Jeff.
We've been working at home as empty nesters, and we came up to the studio to record a pilot.
Yeah,
normal life.
It takes the pressure off, right? So yes, I'm a certified Enneagram coach and also an online high school principal and English teacher.
Ooh,
so I will try to not silently correct your grammar throughout the podcast. I'm just kidding. I won't do that.
Maybe
awesome.
silently though, maybe in your mind.
Sure.
I've been called a grammar Nazi more than one time. And we have 2 adult children. One's a teacher, like me. The other one is working in the fashion industry, which is really exciting. And some fun facts about me. We oversee a school in Uganda that we're highly involved in. And another fun fact, I take cold plunges every morning for 5 minutes. And the last few days have been having to chip through the ice with a hammer.
Yeah, that's right, because you're actually in Canada, right?
Mm-hmm. That's right. We're in British Columbia. I'm in a little mountain town. We've lived here for a long time. Just really love it. I'm looking out at my view right now, and there's trees and the glacier and lake. It's just gorgeous.
Now, Beth, you try the cold shower, not a plunge.
No, not a plunge.
But you were just talking about this the other day. Like you can only endure.
Yeah, I think maybe 30 seconds so far.
You have to build up
my
to
way up.
Yeah.
Yep.
But 5 minutes.
Yeah. So, what? She's an 8 too. So she's just getting at it.
It's interesting. I recall now, I think there were seasons. So I was an athlete in college and I had injured my back lifting weights too early. And actually I was in middle school and it plagued me throughout
that's right.
college. But every once in a while I would jump in one of those kind of jet pool things but it would be filled with ice. And
that's exactly it. Yeah.
Like if you can get through the initial pain, you're okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. You just want.
And
what's the limit?
It's really
by
good
the way,
for you.
Stacy.
The limit is hypothermia, which I think.
Don't want to go there.
They say
So do they
anything
recommend,
over
like,
2 to 6 minutes, and so 5 minutes when the water temperature is 31 degrees, I think. 5 minutes, it gets a little painful, and you just, if you start with something hard, then the rest of it is,
That's such an 8 comment.
And it really,
I know it's totally an 8 practice too, for sure.
Start off hard. Beth, when's the last time you've ever?
As a 9, I'm like, I can't wait to get to my coffee and to get in my cozy, comfy chair
And
in the
my
morning.
blanket.
But hey, I am doing the 30 seconds of really cold shower. So hey, I'm starting somewhere.
Well, that's right. You are
I'm starting somewhere.
And Beth, I do have to say, after I get out, the next best part of my day is putting on a robe and getting my coffee, and I just sit in front of the heater.
There you go.
For 10 minutes. So
bring it in a little bit of that.
I've got the 7 and the 9 wing happening with the cold plunges.
Oh, that's awesome.
I love that.
Well, Wilson's our other guest. Wilson, thank you so much for joining us. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Kia ora, Beth, Jeff and Stacey. It's an honour and privilege to be here. Yeah, and to our Enneagram family and listeners out there, thanks for tuning in. My name is Wilson. I'm from Cantonese and Hokkien descent. So I'm part of what people call the Chinese diaspora. I'm born and bred in Aotearoa, New Zealand. I'm also married to Esther, who's from Dutch, Polish, and English descent. And we have a
Wow.
1-year-old called Malachi. And I'm currently training for ordination under Te Hahi Mihinare, which is also known as the Tikanga Māori Anglican Church, which is an indigenous expression of the what you guys call the Episcopal Church, something like that. So yeah, we're getting ordained next Sunday as deacons, which is really exciting. And I have a background in
Wow.
youth ministry and community development, and the Enneagram's been a great tool for ministry and discipleship. So yeah, I'm a 8 with a dominant 7 wing and a sexual type. So yeah, it's my privilege and honor to be here to chat about the Enneagram and on the topic of wings.
Yeah.
Oh, so glad that you're joining us, Wilson. Now, tell us too, how long is it you've been working on this ordination?
Probably about 2.5 years, 3 years maybe.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah, so it's a big deal.
yeah, it's a big deal.
That's awesome. Well, congratulations, and I'm sure your community's thrilled to have you guys around and taking this next step in your calling. That's super fun. But
Yeah,
I
we
was just
hope
talking
so
with a
too.
pastor friend today about just living in life in ministry and life in the local church. So it's a real gift. Well, we're going to jump into wings today, and it's very common for people to talk about their dominant wing, which is the wing that they most notice and use most often. And many out there believe that they only have one wing, but that's actually not the case. It's not that they don't have two or they only have one, but rather it's just one maybe not show up as much. And just as a bird has two wings, so do all of we. Every number has two numbers next to it. So today we're going to be talking about both wings and why it's important to be aware of them both, particularly for the type 8. It's the type 7 and type 9 parts that play a significant role in their lives. And when we discuss each wing, let us know if one's more dominant than the other. And so we'll talk through that as well.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to dive in with your type 7 wing first. And again, we want to paint the picture of the 7 to see why it would be influencing you in a certain way. So the type 7's core fear is being deprived, trapped in emotional pain, limited, bored, missing out on something fun. And it desires to be happy, fully satisfied, and content. So what you're going to notice with this part is that it's very excitable, it's spontaneous, it gets distracted easily, it can be impatient, it can be very sociable and outgoing, and it's always anticipating future events, like what's the next fun thing, what's the next stimulation I can have, what are the possibilities that I might be missing, and what can I go for? And it supports your main type by really wooing others to you. 7s are incredible networkers and connectors. They also have quick minds, and they're very confident and passionate about what they want, and they go after it, which is very similar to an 8 as well. And so when you've got the 7 and the 8 going at the same time, it is a force for sure. Like they both want what they want, and they're going to get it. And so it's good to understand how that 7 can influence the 8. Now, the 7 wing also, you'll experience moments when they're really healthy, and from the healthy part of the 7 is the 7's going to give the 8 this abundance of radiance, grace, joy. They're going to be able to be more vulnerable from this positive, optimistic heart that trusts others. It will be joyful, spontaneous, playful. It will be able to also make the impossible possible. 7's really, what's interesting is when we talk to 3s, they're really fearful of failure. Mm-hmm. But when you talk to a 7, they're like, failure, what is that? It's just a new opportunity. And so they love to reframe the things that seem impossible or things that can't be fixed. They're like, yeah, we can fix it. And so that's something that the 7 can also bring to the 8. So there's this enthusiasm, there's this confidence that radiates from 7s, and they're very encouraging as well. So Stacy, let's start with you, and then Wilson will have you chime in. But how do these healthy qualities of the type 7 support you as an 8? When do they show up, and what does it look like? Because it's a blend of the two.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they can look a lot like each other sometimes, actually. It shows up for me with the time orientation for sure. Looking forward, what's the next thing I'm looking forward to? what's next, whether it's an adventure or just a trip or seeing someone that I haven't seen for a while. I'm constantly thinking ahead all the time, which can get me in trouble sometimes too. The other thing, 7 is not my dominant wing. So I see it showing up in my ability to push myself in hard things and not really think that it's going to fail. And that's part of the 8's denial piece as well. It's like, well, what do you mean failure? Everything is going to be fine. I'm prepared and I'm doing it. I can turn on my 7 wing. I have to actually in social situations because I'm actually extremely introverted as an 8. And so my 7 wing is the only reason I have it.
I'm curious to see what it show up like whenever you have to turn that on.
It's exhausting. But people tell me you're not an introvert. There's no way.
Right.
And so I can, and I know I'm doing that. I'm like, 7, you got to kick in for the next 2 hours. But it is very tiring because it doesn't come as naturally as using my 9 wing, which would rather be home, watching Netflix under a blanket.
Right. Well, and I think that's interesting. That's a really fascinating thing to point out because I think a lot of people think an introvert is just a quiet person. So then when they see you maybe more sociable and bring a little bit of that 7 energy, they're like, well, you can't be an introvert. And it has nothing to do with that. It has to do with how you get energy. And you get energy by being alone and recharging without interacting with others. The extroverts out there are charging with others. And so I think that's a great distinction. A lot of people can get confused.
Well, another fun thing that we've come to understand when thinking about these different connecting types as parts of us is that other people have relationships to these parts of us. So there are people who say to you like, well, you can't be an introvert because my only experience of you is to be this very energetic, outgoing, adventuresome person. But does your family or your friends have a nickname for this part of you?
No, not that I know of. Maybe they do, but they haven't told me.
Yeah, but like we've talked to one person, like there's like vacation mom or vacation dad.
Yeah.
That like they just another side. Like when was it that your spouse started to notice, oh wow, she can turn on this other part of her personality whenever we're in public versus when maybe it's just the two of us at home?
Yeah, well, he's a pretty strong 5 with a capital 5 and also introverted. I'm just thinking of social situations where he has said, okay, you need to turn it on, and he'll use those words. And now I understand I have language for that. Like, okay, 7, here we go.
Have you ever the 7 part of your heart?
I just call it 7 for now.
Yeah.
For now.
And thinking
well, that's such a great name,
about
right?
that. Yeah.
Wasn't that in, no, that was 11. I was thinking of
Stranger Things.
Stranger Things, yeah.
11.
But 7, I mean, if you're an Enneagram person, you know exactly what you mean when you say
like,
that.
Hey, 7. Yeah. So a good example or a good story to outline that is when we did this big project for our school in Uganda, and we rode our bicycles around the country for 50 days. And he said, your job, if we have a mechanical or when we stop, is to engage with the people. And I will fix the bikes and do whatever here, but you need to keep them away from me kind of idea. Not in a mean way, but like you engage and do the social stuff and I'll do the mechanical stuff. And it was tough. We were tired every day because it's a very extroverted culture. Okay, and to just engage with people all day and wave and be the center of attention was really difficult. But I relied on my 7s for that.
A whole nother thing too, bringing this in the context of marriage. So your 5 spouse really relies on your 7 wing to pick up the social responsibilities.
Yes and no, because Jeff, let me tell you, there have been many a time we'll come home, and because 8s are not really aware of how we come off to people a lot of the time, he will say, did you notice that when you said this, that this happened? Or when someone was telling me something, they actually meant this. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Oh my gosh, do I need to call them and apologize? So he helps me with the 8 part that is best in the social situation. But as far as,
but not in the moment, but
not
after the moment.
Yeah, after the moment. Well, sometimes, the kick under the table.
Happening in the moment.
The kick under the table is an indication.
Yeah, you mean not on a podcast where the 6 is being silly and the 9's like be appropriate.
Right. Yeah. Give him the look.
Oh man, the look.
Yeah, we do have a look.
The table. Yeah. Well, Wilson, tell us about the healthy aspects of your 7 wing.
Because you use 7 more often, right? Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, it's my dominant wing. I guess in everyday moments and just kind of the normality of things. And in social settings, I'm usually stirring the pot, pushing people's buttons, winding people up, just to create some fun, some cheekiness, and just to test intimacy. And this is with like both deep relationships and strangers. And my humor's a bit on the edge. It's sometimes dark, pushing the boundaries, and by some inappropriate. Like one time in high school in class, I was playing with a ball. The teacher told me to put my ball on the ground, so I moved from the table to the ground. Then she goes, "Wilson, what are you doing?" And I replied, "You told me to put my balls on the ground." So just that sort of humor. But usually people say,
Wilson, that's a first on the Your Enneagram Coach podcast.
Oh,
good job. You tested the boundaries.
Yeah.
Here we go. This is a perfect example of an 8 with a 7 wing. Perfect. Yeah. That's awesome.
So usually people say, I'm the life of the party, but I don't really see it. Or when they see me on the guest list, they know it's going to be a good time. But I think the insight behind it is that in stirring the pot to create fun, as a 7 with a dominant 7, or as an 8 with a dominant 7 wing, it's the fastest way we know whether we can trust the group or individual by their response. It's the way we see, whether, what are their true colors and what's behind their mask simply by their response to the humor. And it gives us clarity about the group and their individual character, theology, and also political views. And it shows us, will we find common ground or mission with this person? And we know so much about a person just simply by their response to edgy, dark, boundary pushing, sometimes inappropriate humor. And it's, our humor, and that's how we kind of gauge people, I think. But at our best, I think usually it's in conversation with individuals, deep relationships or with strangers. And we're just learning about people, where they're from, who they are, what's their story, when they met Jesus, what are their dreams, what's their calling. And I get
super
pretty
curious,
excited.
Right?
Yeah, I get excited and passionate. But I think it's my subtype of being a sexual 8. And at my best, it's actually pushing individuals to take the next step from where they are to where they want to be. It's kind of like I see my role as being like a guide, like Yoda guiding Luke Skywalker, and enabling people to take, the next step, to take a risk, just to initiate something, to write a new chapter, or resolve like a conflict or a crisis. And usually in those conversations, it's a brainstorm, it's naming their tools, creating strategies, or connecting them up with the right person or community. And often weeks, months, or years later, when we bump into each other, they often say, I took that leap and now I'm in this new chapter or new vocation. Or they say, I really wrestled with what you said. Can we have another conversation because I need to get my ass into gear? And yeah, I think at its best, it's often because 8s with dominant 7 wings, it's normal and natural to take risks, And also, like we said before, we believe that failure isn't fatal. And sometimes people, sometimes seeing is believing. And people know that about us, that, we take risk and we're not afraid to fail. So often those conversations, it's about how do we take risk or how do we learn to take risks? And they come just to have a chat, just to get that simple push or nudge. And the hope is that, us 8s with 7 wings, we've got some sort of wisdom or practical advice to offer, or simply just being a person in their corner. And sometimes it's like resources and cash, even the Enneagram or even our networks. And I think it's because deep down we love going for the underdog. And I think that's the real gift of being an 8 with a dominant 7 wing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and I love what you're saying there, because 8s really have this instinctual knowing of what others' gifts and talents and abilities are, even if the other person can't see it, and basically calling them out and putting them on the right seat of the bus. But then, like what you're saying with the 7 there, it brings this excitement, enthusiasm and encouragement as well. But it also brings in that networking component. Like, hey, I might not be able to help you, but I know this other person and I want you to connect you with them. And so it's this 8 that is plowing a path for other with forward thinking movement and encouragement. So I love exactly what you're painting, that picture you're painting.
No, Stacy, while Wilson was sharing, you laughed a little bit. What was it? Do you remember what you were laughing about?
I will do exactly that same thing. I'm going to find out right away by, and in Christian circles, it doesn't take much to offend people. Just drop something and see who picks it up and see who, like, again,
so
like
funny.
the inappropriate humor. Whenever I'm on a podcast, I'm just like, so you're going to edit this, right? Because you're having 8s on there and you never know what's going to come out. So I was just laughing at the familiarity of that. It's a good tactic. I'm guilty of using that.
Yeah.
Yeah. 6s can do it too, especially counterphobic 6s.
Oh, sure.
Because they're testing loyalty and, what can I trust you?
I call that part of myself El McCordo. It was a nickname given to me. So there's a little bit of a joke because I was adopted into a Scottish family who were white, but I was actually biologically, my mother was Mexican, my father was Native American. And so my friends, whenever I'd get going as a pastor and say something provocative in a small group or in a sermon, they said, "Oh, it's El McCordo," kind of combining Scottish and
that's your 7 part
and Spanish. And so, but Beth calls like, "Oh, El McCordo's in the house tonight, huh?" So
right, yes.
Party
Here
time.
he is. Life of the party for
and
sure.
I would associate that with my 7 week.
Yeah,
That's right.
absolutely. Yeah.
Well, all the parts of our hearts can show up in healthy and unhealthy ways. And as we talk about the wing 7's unhealthy characteristics, it's important to keep in mind that this part has good intentions and is trying to help. Even though it may be misaligned and it's maybe inappropriate in its methods, the goal is for your good and welfare. Now, your 7 wing can distract you from life's difficulties could be spending money on fun or exciting escape hatches or other unhealthy indulgences. It can make you believe that you are the only one who's strong enough, passionate enough, and able to carry others through life's challenges. You may make big promises and exaggerate what's possible to convince others to follow your lead. And you can be impatient, impulsive, and demanding and express what you want with little regard for how it affects others. Because 7s struggle with anxiety, your 7 wing can show up as restlessness, overthinking, shortness of breath, or even tension in your chest. So we'll start back with you, Stacy. How does your 7 wing show up in unhealthy ways?
I interrupt people when they're talking on a regular basis. And I
Okay.
hate it. I hate that about myself. I think I read something about 7s, and it's resonated with 7s that I've coached, is that you assume you know what they're going to say. And so you just kind of stop listening.
Yeah.
And I'm catching myself doing that more and more often. I'm trying to, because 7s and 8s time orientation are both future, I'm halfway out the door before they finish their sentence because they've asked me to do something. And so it is a problem in every area of my life. And I'm really becoming more aware of it. And I just have to almost sit on my hands, so to speak, before my body just wants to move and jump into action. So
Now,
that what
it's interesting, Stacy, your disposition changed. Whereas when we were talking about the healthy parts of it, and this really illustrates the relationship we have to these parts, but my sense is you carry a lot of sadness about this part of you.
It causes so much problem. It causes so many problems. And because it's kind of a double whammy with 7 and 8 and, both on the move all the time and the confidence level, I have a hard time living in the present. I'm thinking, what do I have to do? And even when the person's talking, like I said, I'm thinking, what am I going to do about this? And so you kind of stop listening. So I've been trying to practice just not even looking around, just looking right at the person and just, it's excruciating sometimes to just focus and be a better listener, because people have said I'm a really good listener, but I know the truth of that is I have a long ways to go in the listening. And even in coaching, I have to watch how much I want to teach and guide as opposed to sit and listen. So I've been listening to some of the podcasts on the listening skills and trying to hone those in a little bit.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, Stacy, have anyone ever reflected back to you? Because the 8 with a 7 wing, there's a lot of energy there. I mean, I wonder if there's a more energetic.
No, there's not.
Not even a
Well,
3
I mean,
with a
like
2.
a seven with an A wing,
Yeah.
but
But-
that combination is
But have you ever felt about yourself, or have someone ever said to you that you're too much?
Oh, yeah. Just this morning. And
I thought it might be the case, but I didn't realize it was, oh no, that's just the water I swim in. Yeah.
yeah, and it's only in reference to, it's not in reference to emotions, other than maybe anger, but definitely speed, energy, being married to a 5 for so long. We've been married for 33 years. He has access to 8, and I can see a lot of 8 in him, and he doesn't resemble a typical 5 in that he is very aware of his body, he's very athletic and all of those things. But he, on a regular basis, will say, can you just slow down? You're going too fast. Like your energy is just too much. And I look at him and say, I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm just trying to help. So we really aren't aware of that bigness, I think, sometimes. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting, Wilson. You earlier had commented on how the 7 part of you combined with the 8 energy can bring out something great in people. But that can also at times be pushy and maybe assertive of like, hey, I didn't want to get on the boat with you, but you're like taking me along the path now. How does your 7 wing show up maybe in unhealthy ways?
Well, first I just want to say I think women 8s definitely have it way harder than men who are 8s, and it's not my place to offer reflection on that or to go deeper on that. But often at my worst, I'm always go, 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 go. I'm always running, focused on the task. And also, like, if I don't, I can feel things just like, I guess, stir in my gut. And like, I think it's the feeling of futility, like nothing's happening. Why, like, is this wasting my time? And but definitely at my worst, whenever someone has conflict with me or my mates, or it's a perceived threat to by myself to me or one of my mates, at my worst, I engage quite aggressively, and also I've had many physical altercations as well. And of course, before meeting Jesus, and maybe a couple after following him, but in those moments, like the first thing that goes through my mind is like, what's the worst that's going to happen? Like getting punched? Like, what's the worst? Like, I'm not made from glass. However,
I love that mindset. Like, what's the worst? You're going to get hit.
What's the worst that could happen?
Yeah,
what's the first time you've gotten hit?
Yeah. So I think 8 males often get hit all the time. Like, So, but what would surprise people more is that there've been actually more people who've backed down and avoid physical altercations with me because I've got in their faces. But that's because as 8s, we believe the best defense is actually a better offense, and making sure that the score is settled. But I think the insight behind that is that we're not afraid of conflict, especially when it's about protecting our vulnerable selves or our mates. And by default, we just charge into conflict, ready to take the person down, and we will put our money where our mouth is. But the interesting thing is that this really energizes us when we do that, when we protect the people that we love or put our money where our mouth is. And just the final note that I'm so glad that Jesus has transformed me with his non-violent ways and learning that violence will only create violence. And, love is never violent. And a great book called Conflict by a lady called Joyce Huggett has actually taught me how to access, manage, and engage with conflict. And it's been a helpful tool for me. And it's taught me heaps about conflict.
Yeah. What was that book that you read? It had a really weird title.
I forgot the gentleman's name, but it sold millions of copies. It's called Nonviolent Communication. I mean, it sounds like a massive it's such a heavy title, but the book's not that way. It's a relatively small book, but it's only articulated like what did I perceive that happened? What do I feel? How did it impact me? What do I need? And then asking a person to change. So, but it has such a provocative title, nonviolent communication.
But it was very helpful, not just
Sure.
for you, but then it kind of bled into the family where we were able to have better ways of communicating with one another.
Well, I mean, I wanted to try it, but probably not at the best time.
Yeah,
We'd
so-
gone on a family cruise
Yeah,
together.
we went on a family cruise. Like the first day, he's like, and mind you, these were like our grown children at the time. They were like 18 and 16, but they were adult-sized people, and we were all in one room.
Oh gosh.
And he's like, "Hey, let's try this."
No, it's not let's try it. It's that I'm reading a book, and I'm going to try and implement that
Yeah.
while we're living in a closet together on a boat.
Yeah, it feels like it wasn't for sure.
The rest of us just laughed at him and like,
And like
yeah, sure.
day 2, I'm like, okay, I'm going to try this later on. This isn't working.
Oh man.
Well, thank you, Wilson. I really appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, let's jump into the 9 side. So the wing 9 that you guys have.
You know, I've noticed over the past couple episodes, we'll have to change it moving forward because you're taking the positive sides of the wings. I'm taking the negative side. Did you do that
They're
on
both
purpose?
you do
fun.
on
They're both
purpose,
fun.
You know, 9s were positive. We're optimistic.
So, yeah, as we're recording these, I'm starting to notice this trend. You know, we've done 1, 2, and 3, and I'm like, wait, hold on, there's a trend now.
Yeah. Okay. So to the positive side of 9s.
The 9 wing, not 9s. We're not talking about 9.
Well, we could, but yes. So the wing 9 can seem counterintuitive, being that the 8 is so confident, assertive, decisive, whereas the 9s play a very different role. The 9s, you know, they fear conflict and tension of any kind. They're looking for comfort, inner stability, peace of mind. And so these two can feel at odds. And yeah, internally, I'm sure, I know because I use my 8 wing more than I do my 1 wing, there is this internal conflict. And yet they both beautifully show up. So what I'd love to talk about is how the 9 shows up for the 8s in a very interesting and particular way. So for the 8s, the 9 is going to show up and give you the ability to be more open, to be more receptive to other people's viewpoints, because the 8s are usually like, nope, it's this way or the highway. Whereas the 9 is complete opposite. It's like, I want to know everyone's perspective and I want to honor everyone's viewpoint. Everyone has a place at the table. And so the 9 part of your heart offers this more kindness and compassion and openness, non-judgmental stance. It's not as black and white. It allows for a lot of gray to be there. It's also very steadfast. And 8s and 9s are both very strong people, but they have strengths in different ways. And the 9 is going to offer you guys tender leadership. And this way you can actually bring in the skills that you have, but it's not plowing over people, it's plowing alongside people, it's plowing for people. And so you guys are going to be able to be more kind and empathetic, compassionate, tender, understanding, gracious. And your decisions will land on people with more thoughtfulness and kindness and maybe even easygoing versus just saying it like it is and being too blunt and too strong. So I'd love to hear from you guys. How do you see the 9 part of your heart showing up and really assisting you in some really neat ways?
Wilson, you want to start?
Yeah, I guess probably when I started doing my reading and research and reflection for my growth in terms of Enneagram stuff, I watched Richard Rohr's DVD on the Enneagram. And I remember him saying that we have a dominant wing, kind of like a dominant hand, and that we can use both wings. And just like our hands, we always have one dominant, more natural hand. And that was the moment when I realized I had both wings. And it was kind of like the moments where I learned how to score with my non-dominant hand in basketball. It just opened up so many possibilities and opportunities of scoring the basketball. And my non-dominant hand was always there. But using it just opened up a whole new way of playing basketball. However, it was hard work. It wasn't natural. I had to put the hours in. And also, the more I practiced my non-dominant hand, I became more comfortable using my non-dominant hand in games. And this was the similar experience of having access of my less dominant 9 wing. It was always there, but in accessing it and using it, it just opened up a whole new way of being in the world. And it wasn't natural. It was hard work. It was uncomfortable and a lot of practice. And it took a lot of nurturing, a lot of hours. But when I started using my 9 wing, I grew into more of a well-rounded person. Um, as my mates say, more balanced and more nuanced person. Instead of being a firecracker exploding everywhere, I was like a fireworks display. And if you ask me,
Yeah.
fireworks displays are like firecrackers that are purposely arranged. So this is the awareness of like the wings, the 9 wing, just teaching me how to step back and read the room. How to be aware of my environment and context instead of just simply throwing my weight into the room. Learning how to lead and develop groups and teams to climb the hill instead of storming the hill myself. And also when holidaying, we talked about holidays, instead of like packing the days full with activities, just simply learning how to enjoy the view and the people with wine and cheese and just taking in the moment. But being aware of my wings and developing my non-dominant wing, can be summed up in that African proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Um, and I guess at its best, it's actually being a team player. Learning how to read the dynamic and the culture of the team and building the culture of the team. And it's just learning to reflect together as a team our wins and losses, but also doing the little things like dishes, organizing food, checking up on others, turning up early, celebrating a birthday. Things that sometimes the upfront leader can't always do. And it's always having the finger on the pulse of the team culture and mission. I guess that's what it looks like at its best.
Yeah, that's great.
Oh, I love that.
I love that analogy. That's so helpful.
You mentioned the difficulty in just training this new part of your heart, giving notice to it, and living from it. What do you think were the tensions for you? Like, what was your relationship to this 9 part of your heart? Did you like this part of your heart? Were you frustrated with it at times? Impatient?
I guess it just opened me up to be more of a relaxed person, a bit more of a still person. So I talked about how in my gut it was always stirring, but accessing my 9 wing, it's enabled me to settle the gut without taking action. It's just
wow. Yeah. That's awesome. Now, what about your spouse? How do they respond to this 9 part of your heart?
Yeah, so my wife, she's a 4, and she believes that beauty is a human need. It's actually taught me how to, like my 9 wing especially, has actually taught me how to appreciate beauty. And we're talking about art, we're talking about nature, we're talking about, just people, and seeing the beauty in people without having to activate, and just to watch and enjoy, actually. Often with movies, I skip to the end. I'm like, we already know what's going to happen. But with my 9 wing, I can sit through a movie because we know that the Avengers going to win. Like, that's why it's called the Avengers.
Yeah. So
that's
true.
awesome. I mean, when I think of you and what you offer me, it is being still and reflecting. Beth loves working from outside. Like, she's out on our patio. I'm surprised you weren't out there today.
It was 32 degrees, and I was considering going out.
Yes.
But I didn't.
Yep.
But I did sit next to the window.
We've got space heaters out there, electric blankets. I mean, she's really committed to being outside.
Yeah.
Oh, that's super fun. Well, Stacey, how about you? Tell us about the 9 part of your heart.
Yeah, when I was first learning about the Enneagram 2, I was like, how can this be a challenger and a conflict avoider? Like, what does that even look like? And so it's really unpacking it over the past few years has been trying to figure out when I do love conflict and will engage in a heartbeat versus I don't like this at all. And so I don't like conflict if it's not about protecting mostly other people. If someone is coming after or being unfair with someone I love or one of my people, then they had better, go into their house and lock the doors because I'm coming to have words. But if it's like dealing with, firing someone or, potential conflict of hurting someone, I'll do anything to avoid those things. I do not like that at all. And I can feel it in my body and my my heart starts to beat because it's not going to be good. It's going to bring conflict or harm to someone. And so that's where the two of them have kind of come together. I have gotten to the point where I can retreat and rest. It doesn't come naturally, but my Volkswagen van does not hurt. I call it my bug out vehicle because I will just hop in that and go camping or biking. I have a hard time sitting still when I'm there, but at least I'm in nature and trying to intentionally slow things down. I do think I can see there's just so much gray area. I am not a black and white person, and the older I get, the more gray it becomes. And I think I've been told that go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, what about for you guys, the ability to see other people's viewpoints when you tap into the 9-wing? What is that like for you guys?
Do you want me to speak on that, Wilson, first?
Sure.
I can easily do that. And I think it comes from being a middle child of 3 girls. That piece, both my sisters are sometimes bringing things to me about the family or other things, and it's very easy for me to see all perspectives. And I can see, I sometimes play that devil's advocate when we're having a political conversation or something, and can kind of see that perspective, what about this? So I find that comes pretty easily to me.
Good.
Yeah.
Wilson, has that been like when you were practicing, your less dominant hand, so to speak, to start seeing other people's viewpoints? And what was that like, and how has that benefited you?
Yeah, I guess definitely my 9-wing has taught me how to read the room and who's in the room, understanding the context and why people gathered. And what I found is that asking good questions, you usually get good answers. So it's just learning how to ask good questions to understand people's viewpoint. And in that way as well, I think with the 9-wing, you start to understand the relational and power dynamics within the room. And that way you also learn the connections of why people have gathered in this room. I guess that's how, the nuance of the viewpoints. And I agree, I think in working on my 9-wing, you start to see things a lot more grey and a lot more complex. It's not as simple as black and white. And actually there's actual layers of complexities to every issue or to every win as well.
Yeah.
Well, although there's great attributes that we can all learn from a Type 9, the 9 also brings some unhealthy aspects to our hearts and our relationships. But remember, it still has good intent and it's seeking to protect you. Now, a 9-wing can be withdrawn and accommodates to people or people please in order to avoid conflict or tension. While it's good for you to sometimes to get away from others, slow down and rest, an unhealthy 9-wing can actually move you to isolation to the point of feeling where you may feel paranoid or afraid that people are out to get you. A 9-wing can also influence an 8 by making them feel less aware of their feelings because they're focused on accomplishing what they desire. Perhaps the 9-wing will help you to ignore or suppress feelings of anger and irritation so that you can keep your relationships less turbulent and possibly more peaceful. So instead of assertively telling others what you want, perhaps a 9-wing may quietly dig in your heels and become stubborn until the other person gives in to your way of doing things. And it's important to acknowledge that these unhealthy habits and to strive for balance. By embracing your peaceful, softer side, you can improve how you relate to others and see how the world with its many shades, like you mentioned before, that there's a lot more gray.
Well, just to kind of insert real quick before you ask them about themselves, just to let people know, even though the 9s are people-pleasing and accommodating, we are the most stubborn on the Enneagram. Yes. I don't know if you knew that. Did you know that? Have you experienced that?
You know what?
Tread lightly.
I'm gonna plead the 5th. I think it's the 5th. Is it the 9th or whatever? I need to plead right now that I don't. I'll take any privilege that I have to not engage.
Well, I'll say yes. Us 9s can be very stubborn.
But it is an interesting energy in the sense that it's not aggressive against. It's just immovable, and you kind of run into it like, oh, there it is. There. Okay, I guess we're done.
Yep. So, Stacey, we'll go with you first. What is it like, when some of these unhealthy attributes of the 9 show up?
Yeah, that last comment really resonated with me. I thought the stubbornness was the 8 part, but now you've got one of the things I had to talk about was kind of the passive aggressiveness of a 9. I've got a
Yeah,
lot of
that's-
9s in my life. And so 8s with a 9, with a strong 9 wing, can be aggressive and passive aggressive. So it just depends
Yep.
on who we're talking to and depends on the day. But my stubbornness, okay, thank you, Beth, comes from my 9 wing. I will just rest in that. Yeah. And then Jeff, your words, okay, we're done here. Like I hear that quite often as well at home, is we'll be talking about something and it's like, you know what, I'm done. I'm not going to get anywhere here. So the stubbornness is for sure one of the main things that shows up negatively from my 9 wing. I think I can also digress to the easiest path forward, instead of taking the one that makes the most sense or the one that is the good path. I can cut those 9 corners and be like, yeah, but if I just drive to the mailbox, I don't have to walk. Or, just making things a little bit easier on myself sometimes, or more convenient, even though it doesn't make sense, is another way I think that it shows up for me.
It is interesting. We've noticed this with the other types as well. So the 7 wing gets you up and going, and the 9 wing can slow you down.
Settle you.
Yeah, but you need both, because there are times to speed up and engage, and there are times to slow down as well.
Well, I like to talk about 8s when I'm coaching, how it's kind of like a dimmer switch on a light system. Is 8s by themselves want to be at 100%, right? All the time. That's the intensity and like the excitement of life. And then you add the 7 on there. It's a whole nother level. And so what I'm always trying to do is say, hey, we don't need you to be like us 9s at 30%, because we need to like put our dimmer switch up a little bit. But
Stop bragging. You're not at 30%.
Am I giving myself too much credit?
I'm totally joking.
I know.
Like you, Beth has this this energy we were talking about this weekend, because even whenever we have a weekend break and we're not working, Beth is still working and thinking about stuff. And you're you don't call yourself a semi truck. You identify more like a Fiat. But the reality is you're more like a semi. Once you get going, you're ready for the long haul, and it's really hard to stop you.
That's true. That's true. So us 9s usually need to like do the dimmer switch up a little bit.
Yes.
But with the 8s, what we're trying to show is the healthy part of the 9. You got to kind of watch how it's happening, but you want to bring that dial switch back a little bit. And that usually scares the 8s, because it's like, what do you mean? Like, that's like the best part of me. And we're like, okay, I'm not saying like, I'm just talking go to 80%, like we're not talking 100, just 80%. 80% is way past more people than you would realize.
Right.
But when you think about a light bulb, it can only last for so long. And 8s don't realize that their bodies can only go for so long. And literally, they will go until their body gets sick and shuts down, because they think they're invincible and they can do it. But if they recognize, oh, I am human, I need to dial this back and I need to have more self-care and margin and slow it down, that's where the 9 wing can really assist you. Now, at times...
The 9 wing helps. This is surprising. And if this is true, the 9 wing helps 8s with boundaries.
Yeah. But for themselves,
For themselves and for others, that they're not...
relationally.
Because the 7's gone. Like
right. That's true. Yeah, so it's the 9 that's going to observe the room. It's going to know the energy. It's going to know how maybe they're being too strong, too big, too blunt, too anything. They'll read people, because the 9s, we're always reading people. It's kind of painful, if I'm honest. But we're reading people and we're like, oh, I can pick up these cues, and that can really help the 8. But of course, you don't want your 9 wing to take your dimmer switch all the way to 0 and totally check out and numb out and forget the world. So with that being said, Wilson, how are some ways that the 9 shows up in unhealthy ways for you?
Yeah, I guess at my worst, with my non-dominant 9 wing, as a Chinese man and as a person of color and a minority within a white neo-colonial dominated society, I tend to check out of conversations, especially ones that are racist, sexist, and ones that uphold systems that oppress and dehumanize people, or simply destroying the resources of the earth. And it's because I'm coming to a conclusion that bad theology kills. And I usually check out of those conversations when there's no deep relationship, so the dimmer switch goes down. the conversation is no longer a dialogue, so it goes down again. The person is not willing to learn, and it's getting ugly, goes down again. And you cannot negotiate where all sides are winning. So it just goes off. Then I don't really believe it's worth my time, energy, or attention. And as I'm getting older, like you said, I've realized that my energy, time, and attention is limited, and it's better used in other places with other people. And I think the switching off and part of the 9-wing, it shows me that I'm so human, that I've got human limits, which an 8 with a 7 dominated wing doesn't believe. And also going back to those conversations, I truly believe that the Holy Spirit can speak to those people in their lives, and that the church is actually big enough and has enough people to disciple and journey alongside those people with that sort of worldview, philosophy, and theology. And it's not all up to me. I think as an 8, sometimes we believe it's only we that can save the world, but really we have a whole church that backs us. So yeah, once I've sussed out the conversation and the type of conversation, and if it's going nowhere, or if it's getting ugly, I'll check out and I won't engage until the next topic of conversation. If it goes and gets more ugly or worse, I'll just simply get up and say, hey, it's time for me to go. And I'm not sure if it's healthy or unhealthy, but it feels unhealthy because my natural 8-wing goes, all right, I'm ready to throw off the gloves, let's go. But my 9-wings reminds me that I can hear God whisper, say, Wilson, there's a time and place for everything, and it's not now. And maybe it's my non-dominant 9-wing that actually enables me to be more Christ-like and wise.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm just curious. Every once in a while, I hear an instrument in the background.
I'm really sorry. I'm at my school, and I didn't know they have band practice down the hall, so I'm trying to push my microphone on mute.
So this is fine. Our whole team is remote, and so we have cats, dogs, plants, babies. We've got everybody who's comes in on cause.
Stacey, this is a 9 world. It's all welcome.
So
it's irritating me.
But I thought how appropriate for I didn't know. I thought it might be you, but I was like, that's fun. Like either it's one of your kids or, if you're at the school and there's someone practicing, like, that's perfect.
It's fun. Yeah.
Love it. Yeah. No, it's not a problem or a distraction. It's perfectly fine.
Well, for all of us, it's really good to be able to observe these different parts of us, especially, well, not just especially when we're not doing well, because when we're doing really well, sometimes we won't even observe when we're doing well and how it affects us in positive ways so that we will do that again. Kind of like you were saying, Wilson, like practice, with the less dominant hand so that you can get better at it and use it in really healthy ways. But we definitely want to know when these parts also show up in unhealthy ways so that we can learn how to be aware of it right when it's happening so we can surrender and depend on the Holy Spirit to work in and through us to bring out the healthier qualities. But that can be really hard for a type 8 because to do that work is to slow down and to observe yourself, right? To be mindful enough of when these things are showing up in less healthy ways. And especially when the 7 and the 8 are going, they're off, right? They're off to the next thing. Now the 9 might be able to help you to carve out some time and to schedule, but it's going to be really important for the 8 to recognize they need time for their body to rest and to recuperate and to think and to process. So I just really recommend, 8s that are out there listening to take the time to sit, to be still with your thoughts, to write them down, to observe what's going on, and notice when these unhealthy attributes show up and to be alert and aware to them, but also jot down some of these healthy things like what Wilson and Stacey, what you were saying, and go, oh yeah, I noticed that. And bring those back up into your life on a more regular basis.
So when we're activated, it also helps us to connect our thoughts and feelings with a story from childhood. And in these stories, you're going to find that wings played a role. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, our misaligned wings are trying to protect us from experiencing more harm. So always ask the question, what about this circumstance reminds me of the pain or the experiences of my past? Well, we're so grateful for Stacey and Wilson who've joined us today. So thank you both for coming and just sharing about your life. It means so much to us and to our audience, and specifically to our types 8s out there and the people who love the 8s that are in their life. And so, Stacey, can you tell us where people might be able to find out more about you and your coaching services?
Yeah, I have. You can find me on the Enneagram Coaches Network. So through your website. And then my own website is FreshTrucksEnneagram.com. And my Instagram is at FreshTrucksEnneagram.
Awesome.
Great.
That's
Yeah.
fantastic. And Wilson, what about you?
I used to have Instagram and a website. However, since I've been training for ordination, I've stopped that. But if you want to message me, I'm pretty reachable on Facebook. So just search Wilson Chan. And if you got a question or want to connect, I'm up for it. And be keen. Oh, if it's, I guess, international, I was going to say let's grab a coffee, but I'll grab a coffee on my end. You grab a coffee on your end.
Well, we do have lots of people in New Zealand that listen in, and we have lots of or several New Zealand coaches as well. So that might even be really fun.
Yeah, for our remote team, we have coffee and connection once a month,
Mm-hmm.
where bring your favorite morning drink, and we're just going to sit around and tell stories. This
Over
morning,
Zoom.
it was highs and lows of the month of January.
It's true.
Just
Nice.
connecting with one another. So, well, remember, if you're interested in learning more about the Enneagram, you can visit us at yourenneagramcoach.com. And if you're ready to take a step further with personalized Enneagram coaching, like with Stacy and Wilson, then you can head over to myenneagramcoach.com where you can find incredible certified coaches around the globe.
And if you're like me and Stacy and Wilson, and you've experienced incredible transformation using the Enneagram and you want to pay it forward, then our certification program, Become an Enneagram Coach, is going to be right for you. And to learn more, all you got to do is go to yourenneagramcoach.com/BEC, and our team will love to walk you each step of the way through that process. Now, always remember, that the Enneagram reveals your need for Jesus, not your need to work harder. It is the gospel that transforms us. Thanks for tuning in, and the next time we'll talk about Type 9s and their wings.